Reading book on pausing and institutions. Written by me, Eric Wadell. First draft, February 2026. Chapter 2. What are institutions? Going back to simpler times, a typology of institutions. If we were to pause now and immediately start looking at modern institutions, we would likely lose one another in our different lines of thought. Modern institutions seem to be both manifold and complex. Instead, we will go back in time and imagine a time when institutions were simpler and perhaps more intuitive to us. That way, the two of us may hopefully pause with somewhat more similar fundamental assumptions about the nature of institutions. Say that we go back 40,000 years in time to a time in Europe when we lived in tribes and in caves. What was life like back then? And what were early versions of institutions like? Firstly, we lived in tribes, and what was of utmost importance for us was the success of the tribe. We lived and died with the tribe. If I could not coexist relatively harmoniously with the other members in my tribe, I would be shunned and pushed away. But if I could contribute to the well-being of the group, I would be celebrated, or at least tolerated. What kind of institution might we call the order of our tribe in itself? Perhaps something like a total institution, since our whole lives was lived within the constraints of the tribe. Alone out in the wilderness, we would not last for long, so the tribe would effectively become our whole world, the totality of the world. Then we might also be in fierce competition with some other nearby tribes, and sometimes a member or two might defect to them. In such cases, those defecting members would leave our total institution for another total institution, likely never to come back. Secondly, within our total institution, there would, however, be a number of additional institutions of lower order, like subgroups, which we may call partial institutions, where the total is the sum of partials. For example, there might be a number of men in our tribe who hunt and fight in a successful manner, and we know them as something like the hunters' institution of the tribe. We might also have a number of women and children who produce efficient tools and clothing for the tribe. And we know them as something like the producers' institution of the tribe. Another example of a partial institution of our tribe would be each father-mother-child family, with one such family institution for every child born. Yet another example of a partial institution would be the generation of tribe elders who hold knowledge about past experience. We may call them our elders' institution. Thirdly, additional to the total and partial institutions of our tribe, we might see that each individual within the tribe carry a specific skill set. Perhaps we may call this order or individuals personal institutions, where the total is the partials plus the sum of individuals. The most obvious example of this would be the tribe leader, carrying the ultimate fate of us all as part of their leader institution. Another example would be the tribe shaman, guiding us through confusing times as part of their shaman institution. We would also see something like a leading female mother, leading all the mothers in the child rearing as part of their leader mother institution. Unfortunately, but naturally, we would also see one member being the common tribe scapegoat or whipping boy, stabilizing the temperament of our group by having their personal temperament sacrificed as part of their scapegoat institution. This is not fun to imagine, but would most certainly be the reality of our tribe. Fourthly, there would be dynamics going on between the three orders of institutions of our tribe. There would be dynamics between the subgroups and the totality of the group. And there would also be dynamics between the individual members and both the totality and the subgroups. We would also see dynamics of cooperation and competition within each of the three orders. Totality versus itself, subgroup versus subgroup, and individual versus individual. We may call this fourth order of our institutions the dynamics institution, where the total is the partials plus the individuals plus the sum of dynamics. A concrete example of such dynamics might be that some of the younger men develop a new and better mode of hunting, creating an institution of competition between them and the established hunter institution within the subgroup's order of the tribe. Another example of dynamics might be when the shaman institution makes a statement contradictory to that of the leader institution, creating an institution of competition within the individual's order of the tribe. Yet another example might be that either a subgroup or an individual has become too tired to follow the collective decisions of the total institution, and in so creating an institution of conflict between a partial or personal institution and the total institution. We can probably find quite a few more examples of both partial and personal institutions within our total institution, as well as dynamics, both between and within each of them. But we have enough to arrive at some form of initial pausing definition of what institutions could have been like 40,000 years ago. We pause and find that institutions are our tribe, subgroups, and individuals, as well as the cooperation and competition between and within them. That institutions are the four orders of our total, partial, and personal institutions, as well as the dynamics between and within them. Expressed as a list or typology of orders, institutions are our first order, where the tribe is the total institution. The second order, where the subgroups is the partial institutions. The third order, where individuals are the personal institutions. And our fourth order, where cooperation and competitions make the dynamics institutions. We will carry this initial pausing definition or typology of institutions with us throughout this book. We will use it as our basic assumption for further reasoning. It is not by any means perfect, however, but still useful in that it may serve to open up new ways of thinking about institutions. The goal of this book is to develop a skill and practice out of pausing with institutions, not to examine them in their entirety. Henceforth in this book, whenever you come across something interesting or puzzling, pause for a second or two, like this. Whenever you come across a point of agreement with my reasoning, pause. And likewise, whenever you come across a point of disagreement with me, pause as well. Institutions are both interesting and troublesome in that they function somewhat differently to each and every one of us. And we will not attempt to do away with those individual differences of ours. After all, there would be no need for such a pluralism of institutions if we would all act the same or be the same. Going from simpler times to modern. How do we traverse the 40,000 years from the simpler caveman-times of old to our modern day? How do we pause with such an astronomical undertaking? For our reasoning to make any sense, we probably need to make a second assumption, apart from our initial pausing definition of institutions. Namely, that this pausing definition is still valid in our day and age. If we can buy into these two assumptions, the definition and its continued validity, then we may be as creative and ambitious as we want with it. If we can buy into that our caveman template of institutions has been valid all throughout these 40,000 years, then we may make further use of it. Now, as food for thought, we will see if we can find some modern-day examples of each of the 4 orders of institutions. Examples of total, partial, personal, and dynamics institutions. What is the tribe of our day? Or the subgroup? Or individuals? What are the cooperations and competitions of our day?